Welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast on CHSM. We are brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. Find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. With Charlie Roumeliotis, I am Pat Boyle. And Charlie, as we tape this podcast Friday morning, 11 o'clock, we've got some big news. Frank Nazar has been recalled from Rockford, and in all likelihood will make his season debut in the National Hockey League Saturday afternoon in Newark, New Jersey. Exciting times.
Yeah, we felt this was coming soon. We had mentioned on the last podcast that Elliot Friedman had kind of hinted at Frank Nazar calling up soon on his 32 Thoughts podcast. And then Emily Kaplan had followed that up saying it's not imminent, but it is coming up sooner than we think. And of course, now it comes. They're going to have a practice day in New Jersey today on Friday, and then setting themselves up for the Saturday afternoon game, and then likely going to play on Sunday against the Islanders as well. So kind of putting him in a position where he can get a full practice in with the guys, and then stepping into the lineup on Saturday. Listen, I've been consistent in what I've been saying. Like I think the original plan for the Blackhawks was to call him up towards the second half of the season and let him have a full first half of the season down in the minors, honing his craft. But it's one of those things where you've heard the Blackhawks management say it over the last couple of years of we want them to show us when they're ready. And it's been one of those things where I'm not sure they expected Frank Nazar to be among the top 5 in AHL scoring, not just leading all rookies in the AHL, but top 5 in the AHL among all skaters. He's actually on a 3-game point drought in the AHL. And so before that 3-game point drought, he was second in the AHL in points. And so he was really blowing the doors off down in Rockford. And even though he is on a 3-game point drought, I was watching some of his shifts in the last game on Wednesday against Iowa, and he was flashing between the legs shot on the penalty kill, but like zone it. I mean, he exudes confidence right now. And so I think it's kind of a situation where the Blackhawks are like, they feel they're in a better spot as a team right now. They're finally getting some more scoring, and it's Frank Nazar coming into a situation where he can help elevate the entire group.
Yeah, look, his speed is evident. He creates time and space for his other line mates because of his vision on the ice and how he attracts defenders and how he can weave through defenders and create more space. I'm really intrigued on who they're going to put him with. Mm-hmm. You know, as I look at the lines, I think everybody would think he naturally would be the second line center. But then do you put Hall and Bertuzzi with him? They're coming off arguably their 2 best games. I'll say their best game was at MSG on Monday night. But they've been flashing quite a bit here in the last couple of games. Do you need someone with some more speed with him? That's going to be a very interesting. And this is, again, where you love that Anders Sorensen is the coach because he has a huge sample size with Frank in Rockford, and nobody knows Nazar better than Anders.
Yeah, exactly. And even I think Nazar had started the season, I think it was as like the 3rd line center in Rockford, and he just totally played his way into the first line. They were kind of easing him into more of a bigger role down there, and then he just became the all situations guy. And yeah, it is going to be interesting to see who they pair him with. It's funny because we're recording this before practice, so you get to hear our perspective before we actually see what the lines are going to be. And it's interesting because the Hall, Donato, Bertuzzi line was easily the best line the Blackhawks had going in that Rangers game on Monday. And so, but at the same time, we've talked all season long how there's been a gaping hole in the second line center position. Connor Bedard anchoring the first line center, Jason Dickinson as the third line center. And it's just kind of been a rotation of players at that second line center position with Kurashev and Athanasiou when he was here, and just no one really taking control of it. And so I'm curious to see who the Blackhawks are going to put him with and who's coming out of the lineup because, we were talking about Philipp Kurashev right before this. It's like, I don't know, like that fourth line with Maroon, Reichel, and Smith seems silly to break them up because that's been a dependable line for the Blackhawks all season. And then I think ideally the Hawks like to pair Foligno and Dickinson together as more of the shutdown guys. And, then what do you do with Teravainen? Do you move him into the first line? I'm not sure. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how they best utilize Nazar with his line mates.
One thing I was trying to find before we got on was Nazar's face-off win percentage. And by the way, the AHL, their website and their is not up to speed for a professional league, in my opinion.
Yeah, you can find deeper hockey analytics stats on the college websites than you can on the AHL.
It's archaic, isn't it?
It really is.
So I not knowing, I also wanted to know if they felt like they need to put him out there with someone who's also capable of taking centers to take face-offs, to take some burden off him. Obviously, they'll give him opportunity on his strong side, but might they put him out there with somebody who can take some draws on his offside?
Yeah, that's a fair point too. I think that's less of a concern for me right now, just because if he plays the way that he's been playing in Rockford with that kind of confidence, even if he's winning 45% of his draws in the NHL or in between 45 to 47%, it's better than like sub 40 where you're like, all right, they're chasing the puck every shift. But for me, I think just to elevate the speed type game of the Blackhawks and to provide some sort of depth scoring. I mean, it's going to be primary scoring if the way he's going to be playing in a top six role, but kind of let that filter through the rest of the lineup and try to elevate the rest of the group. And hopefully it leads to more puck possession and then more 5-on-5 scoring for Chicago.
So we've got Team Nazar, family and friends, a lot of them in the Michigan, Detroit area, making their way to Newark for his debut this season in the NHL. He's already played in a couple of games and scored his first NHL marker. So he's already got that already done. But as we record this, I just got some news that Drew Commesso is going to make his first NHL start tomorrow in Newark, New Jersey. So we've got Nazar back, and we've got Drew after coming in for Söderblom on Thursday night after Arvid had a shaky outing, probably his first shaky outing of the year, where he allowed 5 goals on 19 shots. Drew only faced a couple, saved them both. And I thought he would probably get the start Sunday at the United Center. And that way you get Arvid to get the bad taste out of his mouth. And Arvid wouldn't have to face the Islanders on Sunday. But my understanding, and we'll find this out by the time this podcast drops, it'll be right around the time that they're on the ice practicing, and we'll get official word. But Drew Commesso will make his first NHL start on Saturday.
It's funny because we didn't talk about this beforehand, and I had gotten the same information a half hour ago that Commesso is slated to start. And so I think we got it from from different people. But so I'm hearing the same thing. And I was a little bit surprised, too, that I thought maybe they would give, just for matchup purposes, the Islanders better suit putting in a rookie goaltender who hasn't really played particularly well in Rockford either. Like his numbers aren't great. But I think the reasoning behind it probably is we don't want to give him the second of a back-to-back, and then our guys in front of him are tired. So maybe it's just wanting to put him in a better position against New Jersey. Having said that, New Jersey skates circles around a lot of teams, and we were texting during the Toronto New Jersey game the other day. Like that first period between New Jersey and Toronto, I think shot attempts were like 38-6 in favor of New Jersey. I mean, against Toronto, that's been one of the best defensive teams in the NHL this season.
In the second period, it was shots on goal were like 25-4 in favor of the Devils, and they only had a 1-0 lead.
Yeah. But I will say, to be fair, a few years ago when the Blackhawks got into that really dicey situation with their goaltenders, they had called up Jackson Stauber, and he was like their fourth string guy. And he was surprisingly doing well in the NHL, even though he wasn't putting up great numbers in the minors. So you never know how it's going to work out like that. I think Drew Commesso would probably be the first to tell you that he's had a little bit of an inconsistent season in the minors. But man, he can take that bad taste in his mouth totally away if he turns in a solid performance against New Jersey.
All right, so we've got some interesting storylines here as the weekend approaches. Again, weird schedule. They'll finish up their little metro New York area road trip on Saturday with a noon face-off Chicago time against the Devils. And then they will travel back right after the game. And at 2:00 on Sunday, they will host the team they lost to on Thursday night. What a weird game that was. I was listening to your post-game show. I was driving home after mine. I'm like, let's finally start stacking some wins here. Okay. Let's get real here. Enough of the talk about it. Changes have been made, systems changes, this, that, and the other thing. Got it. Let's see it happen on the ice. And for the 18th time this season, they score first. And Charlie, the NHL tells us the team that scores first goes on to win 65 to 70% of the time. It varies a bit year to year, but somewhere in a 65 to 70% range. They lead the league with scoring first 18 times. They are only 8-8-2 in those games. They make one mistake, and then the next thing you know, it's 3 goals in 2 minutes and 19 seconds, and a 1-goal lead in the third period becomes a 4-goal lead. It's mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling, and you mentioned it's 18 times the Blackhawks have scored first. They've scored the first goal in 11 of the last 12 games. And in those 11 games, the Hawks have just 3 wins to show for it. And it was actually at the beginning of the season when the Blackhawks scored the first goal. I think it was the first 6 games. They were 5-0-1. And since then, the Hawks are 3-8-2. 3-8-1 when they score the first goal. So it's something flipped in the Blackhawks because they weren't really dealing with that problem at the beginning of the season. And that's probably why Kyle Davidson really wrestled with making a coaching change, because he's like, man, we're scoring first. We're going into the third period with leads, and somehow the Hawks aren't coming away with points in games. And it's another game where the Hawks scored the first goal and they came away with 0 points. It wasn't like they got to overtime and you can see them chipping away in the standings, but they're just coming up empty in regulation. I don't know if you saw this. Did you see Patrick Waugh's post-game comments?
I did. I mean, he went off on his team for their collapse the final 6-7 minutes of that game where, the Hawks stormed back and scored 3 goals. Brody and Bertuzzi had 2 goals to make it a 5-4 game. If you watch Patty Waugh's press conference, you would have thought his team lost 6-2.
Yeah.
Not 5-4 winners. That's what makes it more frustrating. It was a bad Islanders team that is not good on either the penalty kill or the power play. They are banged out. They're without Barzal. They were there for the taking. And like you said, you don't even walk out of there with a point.
And what's frustrating about it too? It's not like we can fault the Blackhawks' effort in the game. It's like, oh, what a stinker they turned in. It was like scoring chances at even strength were 30-13. And it's like, man, they had chances. And it was really that two minutes and 17 seconds stretch in the third where they just had those mental lapses. The first goal, Arvid Söderblom for sure wants to have back. And so that kind of led to the spiral. Actually, I want to rewind to the Philipp Kurashev penalty. I mean, that was not goaltender interference.
Yeah,
and that ended up leading.
I didn't think it was either. Darren Pang brought it up on the broadcast. That's a hockey play. Let him play. Sorokin is outside of the paint. You are allowed to have contact outside the paint. It doesn't necessarily mean it's goalie interference. I don't know. I was surprised by that. But that being said, that he goes off for that and they end up punching in a goal. And it was also, a couple of, I would say, mental errors on the ice, and the worst time to have a goalie performance that was not up to par.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. And the reason I bring up that penalty too is it's like when you're in the Blackhawks position where you're dead last in the NHL in the standings, you make a coaching change, you can't stack more than one win in a row together. Like they've had really difficult times stringing together 2 consecutive wins this season. And it's like they're playing well, they're leading 1-0, they're in control of the hockey game, and then that penalty happens. And the Blackhawks have to be mentally tougher to be able to overcome those types of adversity and make the kill. I mean, technically they did kill it off because the goal came like a second or two after Kurashev stepped. But it's like, I mean, it might as well was a power play goal because Kurashev hadn't even gotten back in the play yet. And so it's just, you see that, and it's like now the game's 1-1. The building livens up. The Hawks are they're trying to get breaks themselves to break through to string together some wins. And then when they go the other way, it's almost like you have to overcome both the fragile psyche of the group and some of the bounces that don't go your way. And it can seem even more daunting. And so, yeah, the penalty was frustrating, but it was really that third period where it's still a 1-goal hockey game, and Söderblom, it's a difficult goal to give up. And it's hard for me to fault him because he went into that game with a .921 save percentage and had just 2 wins to show for it. And so it's like he's been picking them up, and they don't have much to show for it. But like you mentioned, it was just an unfortunate timing of that goal against that he wants to have back, because it's like the Hawks were in total control of that hockey game. Even though they weren't leading to that point, it still felt like they were the better team. And like,
they were. And the scoring chances and the high dangers back that up. Back to Arvid's performance, that first goal, which again, it doesn't go down as a power play, but it may as well have been. He's tracking the puck as they're moving it around to Holmstrom. So he tracks it to his right where Holmstrom is set up, and there's a screen in front. He goes to look around the screen. At that point, Holmstrom is already putting it on a tee for Chalowski, and it's just that little bit of hesitation, and he's looking right, doesn't get quite the push off he needs to get back in the middle of the crease, kind of a little deep in his crease, I think, too. I still think on the Chalowski goal, the first goal of the game for the Islanders, that's a goal you'd like to save. It was a clear shot. It was from distance. But again, it was kind of the movement he was having. The second goal, came in an opportunity where the fourth line had the opportunity to get the puck out of the zone. Craig Smith. And if you saw, you could tell they were talking to Matty Meacham and the video guys, because it looked like the puck was in the air around Craig Smith's midsection, and it could have been hovering around the blue line, maybe outside of it. Again, don't get me started on why we don't have that camera angle. I mean, I don't honestly, like, it makes no sense to show any other angle but that angle, because that's the only one that's definitive when it comes to that. So they were trying to decide if he indeed did get the puck out of the zone. They deemed he didn't. Play continued. And in the sorting process, Kevin Korchinski allows Holmstrom, who's kind of near the half wall, he was checking him, and then Holmstrom's drifting to the top of the circle, closer to the blue line. Korchinski lets him go. Maroon kind of bailed a little to pick up another man. And they had talked pregame about letting pucks go back to the point and not challenge them and focusing more on players that are in the slot or in the dangerous areas. And this one was like a Korchinski mistake. Holmstrom walks in and Söderblom never saw it. Like he was still, the puck is in the back of the net coming out, and he's still like facing like the wrong way. So I don't know how did on that particular sorting situation, taking in what you heard, what they were talking about the last couple of days prior to this game, and then how it played out. These are kind of some of the growing pains you have when you tweak systems a little bit and have a young defenseman out there like Kevin Korchinski.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at it to break it down specifically. To me, it just came down to that puck has to leave the zone. And Craig Smith knows that because, I mean, it is inches away from leaving the zone. But even before it even got to that point, he could have, Craig Smith could have just chipped it out off the boards to the right side, and so that's where it's disappointing. And I will say this too, you mentioned on the first goal of Söderblom not tracking the puck. So the first two goals of the game that we just broke down was actually something that Söderblom, I remember talking to him during training camp this season. And when I was asking him about last year, what's an area that you really feel like you got away from or whatever, and he's like, tracking the puck. He's like, I feel like I was giving up a lot of rebounds, but the kind of the root of the problem was I wasn't tracking the puck through traffic well. And so that was kind of, it was interesting that the first two goals against the Islanders were tracking pucks from the point and kind of seeing through bodies. And so I think that's something that he's really cognizant of, and I'm sure he's going to continue to work at that for sure at practice today, I'm sure. But yeah, for me, that second goal, man, it just has to get out, because that's one of those things even Luke Richardson talked about. He's like, turnovers at the blue line or just getting the puck out when you're that close into the zone. And then the sorting, I kind of just ignore, because it's like, it's hard to get out of your mind that puck like was inches away from leaving the zone. And I feel like whether the Blackhawks had the camera view of whether it was challengeable or not, it was probably way too close to challenge and then risk missing it. And then you got to go on the PK. And then you're like, oh, we just kind of,
but at least it's the 32nd ranked power play or whatever. But no, I know what you're saying. And hindsight is certainly 20/20 on that one. I'm not going to break down every goal. The next one was even more frustrating, as that to me was just like poor. They were not connected as a 5-man unit. They allowed the puck to go through the neutral zone like a hot knife through butter, and it was a bad goal on the Dobson goal. That was one that I think it went 5-hole. I don't know what he thought he was expecting, but it was bad. One thing that was a positive is, and I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but when I was watching Bedard in the first period yesterday, I'm like, he's going. He is going. And I'm like, he's feeling it. And within, 30 seconds of that, saying that to Kaylee, he puts it in the back of the net. He has that unique body language that Patty Kane has. When they're going, it is so evident. The confidence is just exuding. The head is held much higher. The shoulders are up. The skating is there. The jump is there. The shots, he had 4 shots on goal in the first period. He didn't register another shot on goal the rest of the way, which was stunning. But the bottom line is this: a goal and 2 helpers, points in 3 straight. He now has 7 points over his last 6 games. We've been talking about this on the podcast for weeks. When he gets going, they're going to come in bunches. I think we're on the precipice of one of those 14 points in 7 games type of runs from Bedard.
Yeah, for sure. It was so evident in the first period. You mentioned how he had 4 shots on goal. So he had 4 shots on goal in that first period, like you mentioned. In the previous 4 games combined, he had 4 shots on goal.
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, Yeah, and I think he had 6 shot attempts total in the first period. So you're like, all right, this guy, he's buzzing tonight. He wants the puck. And it wasn't just 1 goal, 2 assists. It was, I mean, he had that turnaround pass to Philipp Kurashev early in the first period. He had
that's his brilliance. I'm like, you're looking at that play and you're like, oh man, that was an opportunity missed. And all of a sudden he spins and he sends it through, like 2 guys to Kurashev. And I'm like, how did that happen? I mean, how did he even see that?
Yeah. And he does that at practice a lot too, that I've seen.
Crazy.
He's so good at it. But it was also the zone entries. It's like going, kind of toe dragging to the backhand or whatever. Just the way I'm like, he doesn't do that if he's not feeling himself. And so that to me was like, swagger is back. Confidence has been growing over the last couple games here. And that to me is the fact that after he scored that goal, he looks at the crowd like almost like I'm like,
if that celly wasn't a statement in itself, like, yeah.
Yep.
And I may not be in 4 nations, but you're gonna see plenty of me on the highlight reel here in the National.
Yeah, when he ended that 12-game goal drought against Dallas at the United Center, he looks to the heavens. He's like, "Oh, thank God, I'm done."
Right.
Now he scores a goal, and he's looking at the crowd like, "Yep." It was like the Dustin Bufflin in Vancouver when he remember it in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, it was great. So again, and he's I want to say he's doing it by himself, but like Kurashev and Mikheyev are not exactly. I don't know what's gotten into Phil Kurashev. I really don't, but it's he's getting a lot of run in some top 6 opportunities, and he has done nothing with it this year. After a career year last year, Phil, I know he's battled the confidence, and a lot of these guys have, but like when you see Bertuzzi and Hall come out of it a little bit, I expect to see more from Kurashev. He's had chemistry with Bedard in the past, and I've yet to see much of that this season, Charlie. And I don't know how many more opportunities he's going to get to skate with Bedard.
Yeah, it's difficult for Kurashev too, because they've desperately been looking for someone to not only help Bedard elevate his game and get out of the slump when he was in one, but collectively the entire team's offense has been down, and it's like they're desperately looking at him to be part of the solution. And the concerning part for me is not that his statistics are down. It's that there are games where I'm like, he didn't really do much to generate any chances, and he's not a guy that's on the first or second penalty kill unit. That's where he's impacting the game in other ways. He just hasn't been the same player that he was last year, and it's been really disappointing. And I'm sure he'd be the first to tell you that as well. And it's, you look at now the Hawks calling up Frank Nazar. It's like you're trying to figure out these line combinations, and it's like the more they add to the players down in Rockford, like whenever Landon Slaggert's going to be ready to be full time, it's like guys are going to be moving out of the lineup, and if you're not producing, that could be you.
All right. Anything else you want to get off your chest before we wrap things up? The big news, Nazar has been recalled. Drew Commesso will make his first NHL start on Saturday against the Devils. And we're waiting to see the line combinations, who Nazar will skate with, and if Bedard will continue to skate with Kurashev and Mikheyev. You got anything else?
Yeah, so Alec Martinez, he was placed on injured reserve to make room for Frank Nazar on the roster, but semi-concerning that he hit the ice for practice the other day and then just immediately left, and he flew back home to Chicago to get reevaluated. So we'll see if that's going to be something that is a longer-term thing, or just he's going to be out a little bit longer than normal, which is going to be interesting because now it feels like Kevin Korchinski's run it in the NHL is going to get a little bit longer until Seth Jones and Alec Martinez get back. And by the way, poor Rockford. Frank Nazar gets called up. Korchinski's now in the NHL. Louis Crevier is the extra defenseman. Commesso is here. It's like Rockford's getting yanked away, and they're having a tough season right now too. They just lost 5-0 the other night. And so, and their coach gets called up too. So it's like all of the Rockford is the last couple of weeks have been interesting for them. But yeah. Oh, and I also want to mention TJ Brody scored his first as a Hawk. So that's now 4 goals by Blackhawks defensemen in the last 4 games. They had 4 in the first 25. So they're continuing to get those contributions from the back end, which is, I think, a big priority for Anders Sorensen as he wants those defensemen to get more aggressive.
Yeah. And, I thought the young defensemen played a really strong game at MSG on Monday night, as we mentioned on a previous podcast. I think part of that is also to the team that they were playing in the New York Rangers. That is going to do it for us for the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast on CHSN, brought to you by Toyota. Toyota, let's go places. For Charlie Roumeliotis, I am Pat Boyle. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll catch you next time.